Welcome everybody to the April 28th Public Works and Finance Committee meeting. I'm Dan Carscallon, and to my right is Wayne Krause. To my left is Art Betchie, and to his left is Gary Reedner, City Supervisor. First thing on our agenda is the approval of the April 14th, 2014 minutes.
Look good to me.
Well, and I was here, and I can second that. So.
All right. We'll go ahead and approve those. Number 2 on the agenda is a public meeting regarding the 1021 Alturas Drive lot division, and Mike Ray is going to present that to us.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So before you today, we have a simple lot division request to accommodate a twin home dwelling at 1021 Alturas Drive. And just to familiarize you with your site, there it is in the center of your screen, outlined in red, fronting on Alturas Drive, running east-west. You also have Blaine Street there to the west, running north-south. Also have the old Tidyman's, which is currently used as NRS's wholesale warehouse. You have a LDS church here to the northwest, and you're also surrounded by various residential dwellings within Indian Hills 6 subdivision. Looking at the zoning in the area, parcels located within the R4, which is multifamily zone. You have a swath of motor business to the north, as well as other various residential zones, R3, which is medium density residential, and R2, which is moderate density residential to the south. You also have a few pockets of residential office there, here to the east, and also to the northwest there. Looking at a little bit closer, the parcel currently vacant, 5406 square feet in size, 60 feet of lot frontage, 94 feet in depth. This is the proposed division. Once again, it's to accommodate a twin home, as was constructed on those parcels to the west as well as to the north. So essentially dividing that in half. The resultant parcels are both approximately 2,700 square feet in size, and will meet our minimum lot width for that zone, which is 25 feet. They're currently proposed to be 30 feet in width. And so just to review the R4 zone for twin homes, minimum lot width 25, minimum lot area is 2250 square feet, and the setbacks, exterior is 8, interior is obviously none for a twin home. The front's 15 or 20 feet for garages being front-loaded, and a rear yard setback of 20 feet. So we've noticed the site within 600 feet. We've also posted it 7 days in advance for the public hearing before you today, so there may be public in the audience that we may wish to speak to this application. Staff's recommendation before you today is to take public comment if applicable and recommend approval of the lot division request with no conditions suggested. Certainly be able to answer any questions that you might have.
Do you guys have any questions for Mike?
Just one quick one. Is there any impact on on-street parking if we keep lining up twin homes like this with the driveway for each half? Are we going to start depleting our on-street parking abilities?
If you look, if you notice on the north side of the street, there's quite a few opportunities. You also have 24 feet in between curb cuts there, and this is intended to accommodate a parallel parking space. And so, they all have driveways. We all have the opportunity. They all have to provide the opportunity to have 2 off-street parking spaces per twin home. Usually, they accommodate that in a two-car garage, as well as 2 additional spaces in front of that garage, and so no concern from staff on that.
Okay.
Wayne?
No, it's fine. We've been doing this. This is the second or third one we've done this now, and it seems to be working pretty well. I've got friends that bought a home in there, and they're real happy with right there. So, yeah, I think it sounds good to me.
Okay, well, this is not a public hearing, but it is a public meeting, and if there's anybody out there in the audience who'd like to make comment on this in any way, then we'll go ahead and let them. And looking like there isn't any. Nope. How would you guys like to proceed?
Send her on to council with recommending approval.
I agree with that, yeah.
For what, recommending?
Especially that.
We put that on consent agenda?
Yes, sir.
Then? All right, thanks, Mike. And now Mike's going to bring up our next agenda item, which is the 2013 Certified Local Government Grant Program, and it's the amendment to the 2013 grant and the acceptance of the 2014 grant. And I guess you can keep on explaining.
Thank you. Well, I just wanted to bring you up to speed. As Dan mentioned, this is the 2013 CLG grant amendment and the acceptance of the 2014 CLG grant. And so just a little bit of background. In September of 2012, a certified local government grant request was submitted on behalf of the Moscow Historic Preservation Commission to the Idaho State Historical Society, and this was to hire and fund a consultant to conduct a reconnaissance survey of the Fort Russell Historic District as well as 450 properties in the surrounding area. In January 2013, Historic Preservation Commission was awarded $3,500 in CLG monies for the survey project, and also required a 50% match, which could either be in-kind or cash contribution. Subsequently, 2 RFQs for the reconnaissance survey were put out, both published, first one in March and the second one in May. We received 1 respondent from AD Preservation, and that was for a total project cost of $11,000. And the Historic Preservation Commission had subsequently awarded the contract to that company, which is out of Spokane, Washington. So this is looking at basically the existing district outlined in red. You can notice mainly a zigzag configuration when you're there. You have a sense that you're in the district, but you have no, sort of wayfinding signs, street signs, and it's hard to tell whether you're in or out of the district. The blue line represents basically the surrounding area that was to be surveyed as well. So this doesn't mean that this is going to become the Fort Russell Historic District. This basically just takes an inventory of all those properties and better informs us when making a decision as to whether or not the district should be expanded, if it should at all. So that's what that represents. We got tied up a little bit last year in the federal congressional budget being delayed, so we didn't have distributed funding to the state historic preservation offices around the country until about summer of 2013. In 2013, CLG grant completion date was amended basically from August 30th, 2013 to August 30th, 2014. So they're allowed to roll over that grant funding from under a 2-year period, basically. So currently, the State Historical Society wishes to award an additional $800 on top of the original $3,500, and that was for the 2013 CLG grant. And so that brings us up to $4,300 for the 2013 CLG grant, which has the completion date of August 30th, 2014. The state additionally wishes to award Moscow Historic Preservation Commission a 2014 CLG grant of another $3,500, and that brings us to a total of $7,800 for both years, 2013 and 2014. Both grant periods would end August 30th, 2014. Since the total cost of the reconnaissance survey project is $11,000 and we're required to have a $5,500 match requirement, 50% match, basically we would have about $2,300 left in CLG money for this year's grant that we could potentially roll over to next year for possibly a National Register nomination. This is after we do a couple charrettes and make sure we have public input, and so that could be an option for next year. Staff's recommendation before you today is to recommend acceptance of the additional 2013 CLG grant funding not to exceed $800 and to recommend acceptance of the 2014 CLG grant award not to exceed $3,500. Certainly be able to answer any questions that you might have.
Were my eyeballs right in discerning that the matching part has already been put into the budget?
Correct.
And is AD Preservation going to be able to get it done by August 30th?
That's the requirement for the grant, and so they have to get it done by that date, correct?
So we cross our fingers and say, yeah, get it done?
Well, they were able to start in November, so that gave them a little bit of extra time. Usually, these are just one-year grant cycles, and usually less than a year, about 10 months. And so they have a head start, and they're focusing on completing this. They're shooting for about the end of June for the completion date. They've already completed Phase 1, which is basically to resurvey the existing district. Now they have to move to the periphery, into those surrounding 450 properties.
Cool.
Gary?
So as I recall, Mike, originally the RFP went out, or RFQ, and it came back at a much higher rate than what we had expected. We expected about $5,000, came back at 11. At that time, the council authorized going up to $5,500 for the match, so which is a 50% match required for the entire project. Okay, and we're carrying monies over from last year to this year to get that done.
Correct.
Okay, and I've talked to Don Palmer about it, and the process wasn't quite as smooth as what we'd expected, but we can make that happen.
Wayne, you got anything?
Nope, I'm good.
You guys all right with going ahead and
Oh, yeah.
I am.
recommend approval since they're throwing more money at us? So then there will be an extra $2,300 you're saying that we might be able to do something else with, and is that going to require a match as well?
Well, we have that currently in the proposed Historic Preservation FY 2015 budget, and so we'll see what happens with the funding in that regard, but we are anticipating that, and we'll hopefully be able to provide that 50% match for next year's grant, either that or we can give the money back to them and not expend it.
Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and put that on their consent as well.
Okay.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike.
And now, we are going to talk about the FY14 Idaho Americans with Disabilities Act Pedestrian Curb Ramp Grant Program. And Elisa Anderson and Scott Bontrager are going to talk about it. We're going to have curb ramps all over the place.
$24
ADA
million.
compliant ones.
And ADA compliant.
That's the main thing.
Good clarification.
Good
So-
afternoon.
Good afternoon. This is our third round of applying for this funding. It's actually state funding, so it eliminates some of the environmental and Davis-Bacon wage requirements under it. So we can apply for up to $60,000. Our prior two projects, one is under construction and one will start construction on June 1st. And so our third round, we're looking at applying for $59,950. And this year, we're going to, rather than put in cash, we're going to put in $13,200 in-kind services for design and construction management and engineering. The last couple of years, we'd put in cash. However, with this being on the state highway, we've put quite a bit of cash already into it, so we're going to propose that we just do the design services this year and the construction management. And so the total project cost would be $73,150. In your packet, you had a list of the locations. I think one of the main things to look at here is that it will complete the corridor from Palouse River Drive all the way to Highway 8 and Highway 95 intersection there. And then we have one straggler that's over on Highway 8, also by the Hebling Auto Parts. Is that correct? It's the
alley there.
yeah, the alley ramp there. That's pretty bad. So Scott may have some additional information to share about this project, but we're moving forward with, getting as much money as we can to complete the list.
It's still all along state highway right now.
Yes.
Yeah, that's all highway stuff. And, this is just a continuation of the projects we're currently working on too right now that are both in construction. It's just going to be the next phase of it.
And is this next year construction then, or is it still, would it be able to get in for this year?
No, it'll have to be summer of 15.
Summer 15,
Yeah.
okay. Go ahead, Art.
So given our recent surprises in bids, do we have a series of contingencies built in case the bids for this come in fabulously shocking again?
Yeah, there's a lot of contingency built into these. The ones that we have been receiving in the past 2 years have been lower than expected. And we already have it built in to have a little bit of extra contingency in these 4 things that we're not aware of running into with state pedestrian ramps out there and other things that are associated with it.
Good. Good.
Wayne?
In discussion, in talking about just kind of what Art said, where do we go if the estimates come in higher than the engineering estimates? Do we tend to lose these grants if the estimates are too high and we put them out for rebid? We can always rebid them.
We can rebid them. We did that the first year. At that time, we had bid it in, I think, late summer, early fall, and at that time, all the contractors were already busy and locked up.
Right.
So we waited till a little bit later and offered them a different construction window, and at that time, we got additional bids at a much lower price.
Okay, so that's always an option for us to be able to do with this. We're not tied in with a real tight time frame then.
Right, we can also request approval to maybe delete one of the locations from the bid process because, the bids came in too high.
I think we've done
or
that
something.
on it.
We did on the very first round, I think,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move that forward as well.
Consent?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
And since we have Elisa up here, she's going to talk to us about state and local agreement with middle schools, safe routes to school safety improvements, Moscow Community Choices for Idaho. And I guess Kevin's going to help her on this one.
Yeah, I have all kinds of partners in
Yeah,
crime.
partners all over, partners in crime.
So this is a project that we've worked on for the last year, and we've finally gotten the contract for it. And so it's for the new Community Choices of Idaho program, and it's kind of a wrap-in of all the prior programs that ITD had available, Safe Routes to School and enhancement program, those types of things. So they pulled all that money together, and now we can pick the type of project that we want to apply for. So you guys had looked at this project last year when we applied, but we'll just kind of review it again. We're working at the Moscow Middle School. We're putting in sidewalk across the parking lot and channelizing that area. Kevin will be able to give you kind of more of the engineering detail of it, but basically the award is for the amount that we anticipated, and we have the match available for it that's been budgeted for the $40,014. They gave us a good split on the match amount, 92.59 with 7.41 in match. So it's just a matter of getting the contract executed and working into design.
So they're actually letting us, well, I guess this is a public property technically with it being at the middle school, but taking and building a sidewalk along the school parking lot. Is it parking lot as well, or just the sidewalk portion?
No, they're allowing the channelization of the parking lot. We'll work with the school district to reconfigure it in a way that works for them and the buses, but just separates the pedestrians from the cars and buses a little better.
Okay.
Also, that school district parking lot, or the junior high parking lot on the west edge of that, there's a slope, grass slope that you all are familiar with. The pathway from along that slope will connect D to E, so that'll be a big benefit. The other path that goes from D over and becomes Cleveland sidewalk is very popular. One of the things that we included in the grant, and we'll have to see if we end up with enough money to get it, is a pedestrian counter, which we were going to put at the south end of Euler Field there on that pathway. The Safe Routes to School folks have voiced an interest of the junior high students using, collecting some traffic data and looking at the data that comes from the ped counter, and they thought that would be a good project for them.
And so what would they do with the results then?
Analyze them. Future engineers, they like numbers.
Yeah, there you go.
Gary?
So you see that our match on this is 7.41%,
Yes,
and we have the $40,000 budgeted for that.
yes.
And have we made a determination, is there a recommendation from engineering as to whether we will design it, or will it be done by a consultant?
We don't know that yet. We have, by this agreement, 3 years to construct it. We need to see our in-house resources if they're going to be available. We have, most recently, as Bill mentioned, in the process of the contractor meetings, we have more or less beefed up that phase of our work, and we're putting more focus on that. So things, we're not going to have as many resources for in-house design, but our intent at the time of the application was to design it ourselves. But we will talk with ITD about the possibility of farming that out if need be.
You know some guys down there still.
Yeah.
Art?
Well, I'm gratified to see the reconfiguration of D Street, which currently is kind of disorganized in its whole approach to the middle school area, and segregating the 2 lanes of traffic and making some much more defined pedestrian crossings, I think, is a really great thing that'll help out a lot. I'm much in favor of this.
Okay.
One of the things that I didn't mention about the traffic counter is a lot of communities are going to permanent counters and using that data for grant applications and such, so it won't just be for a science project. It would be something to add to our yearly counts that we've been doing, so it'll be useful information.
Cool.
We knew that.
I just want to make sure.
All right, so you guys are okay with this? We'll move it
Good.
forward as well.
Yes, sir.
And Lisa's just camping out up here today. She's going to tell us about the Americans with Disabilities Act transition plan for pedestrian facilities and the public right-of-way. And Gary's going to help her this time.
What little I can.
I think
I
we've
also-
seen this before, haven't we?
Yes. Yes, you have. And I also presented to Administrative Committee earlier today, and you know, as you said, you've seen this document before, and it's a document that we're required to have approved by the City Council in order to continue to apply for funding for state and federal grants. It's been 2 years in the making, and we've all worked as a team, engineering and admin and legal, in making sure that the document meets all the requirements, and also put together evaluation plans and things that we feel we're capable of implementing and handling in-house at this point with the timelines. We anticipate having the detailed evaluation done by 2022, preliminary evaluation by 2018. And in the meantime, we will continue to do public outreach, and we've had several public meetings. We've taken in not so much a lot of comment on the content of the plan, but a lot of input on different locations, especially ones from, you know, times when we have inclement weather. So one of the points that I just want to make sure that everyone's well aware of is that we have 2 options in this plan, and it's to either request an accommodation or file a grievance. And our goal would be that we could handle most everything as a accommodation, because we can find resources to help people get wherever they need to be, whether it be through public transit, taxi service, or whatever we need to do, you know. So I don't want people to be afraid of this plan and say, you know, this is something we're never going to be able to handle. I think there's always a way to make an accommodation. And so that's really the goal. It'll be a continued working document. We'll continue to update it as far as what projects are coming forth that have additional improvements. At this point, what we're looking at now, since we've brought this to you on several occasions, and I've met with the new city council members and the new mayor individually about this, is we now need to adopt the standards, and the ones that the Federal Highway has available are still draft standards for the ADA, so we'll go ahead and adopt those. When they become final, you'll probably see me come back to you with a new resolution adopting the finalized version. And then with that in place, we can go ahead and adopt the plan. And as I said, it'll continue to be a working document, but this is one that we need in order to continue to receive our funding, and it is mandated, so this falls under
Art.
compliance.
Yes.
Almost everything. One thing that occurred to me as I was going through here on the budget section on the sidewalks, seems the citizens are responsible for the sidewalk in front of their own residence, does the budget take that into account in terms of the $14 million for the cost of getting everything fixed up? Does that include the sidewalks in front of people's residences that they are responsible for, or is this just new lanes of sidewalks where they don't already exist?
You know, I think it's a combination. I'm going to defer to Kevin on that because he actually did the budget for that, so. And that's a
I'm just
good
kind of
question.
curious, is the budget going to go up or down, or how does this shake out?
I haven't seen it for a while, so I believe it is,
It says replacement as well.
it should have been the total cost of bringing our sidewalks into compliance, all the sidewalks.
That's what I
in
thought.
front of the private properties as well.
I would note, though, that it does not make assumptions as to who will pay for those. It's just saying this is the
This
cost.
is how much it would cost
So
to
if,
fix them all.
if adjacent property owner is responsible, then we would presumably contact that property owner to contribute.
So the sticker shock to the city may not be what it appears.
I suspect it will be significant.
But
I would
not-
hate to see a situation, and it would not be one that I could support if it was, would be that if a homeowner had a 4-foot sidewalk, and all of a sudden the government agency said, well, now those have to be 5 foot to be in compliance, and then tell the homeowner they had to pay to put a 5-foot sidewalk in where they already had a good 4-foot, that wouldn't wash.
That's not the way our code is written.
Right.
If they are responsible, that they're passable and in good repair, but it doesn't include if
So I think
street
that
standards
kind of
change.
addresses what Art was saying a little bit, that if they're already there and they're good sidewalks, the homeowner's not going to be responsible for bringing them up to ADA standards.
And as you can see from the plan, there are miles of sidewalks
There
that
are.
need attention, so I doubt you're going to see us tear out a 4-foot sidewalk anytime soon if it's in good shape.
That I would hope not.
Kevin?
One thing that you do need to be aware of is the $9 million on the previous page A3. That is our responsibility, at least at this point. We've been
That's the public-owned.
100% of the pedestrian drops we've been
Oh, okay.
responsible for.
That we've been kind of chomping away at with
Yes.
these other grant monies. Yeah.
Slow but sure. How to eat an elephant?
A little bit at a time.
Any additional questions?
I guess I have, is this going to be, are we going to basically bringing this back annually, or is this like a 5-year?
I think we stated in here every 2 to 3 years.
2022.
Well, actually, that's when we anticipate having the detailed evaluation done. But as I shared with Administrative Committee earlier, I'm already aware of some additions we need to make to the plan, and that would be to add the public transit bus stops. And we know we have a couple that aren't ADA compliant right now, but they're in areas that we really, the mid-block bus stops, you really don't want to put a curb ramp in right there. There's
Right.
issues. So we've had a couple of requests on that, and we'll need to talk further about that and see what accommodations we can make there. And so that would be the first addition that I know we'll be making to the plan, is an inventory of those and, cost estimates of any further improvements that we need to make on the system.
Okay.
But as you point out, it's a living document, and it's going to change all the time anyway.
Yes.
So
Changing, well, we haven't changed anything even. As far as action, Gary, with 2 resolutions attached to this, is this going to be should this be a regular agenda item then, since we basically have to do two things to...
Yeah, the Administrative Committee asked about that. It was determined it'll go on regular agenda because we want to make the public aware. We've had public meetings on this. Want to let people know that it's out there. So
Okay.
I anticipate that Elise will do her usual thorough job, and we'll discuss it and get both resolutions passed on the regular agenda.
All right. Then we'll see you next week.
See you Monday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Okay, moving forward. Number 7, Southgate 3rd Edition Phasing Amendment Request. And Bill Belknap's going to bring that to us.
I bet we get a PowerPoint.
Oh, Bill's expert at PowerPoints. Well, hello, Dwight.
I just like sitting up here.
I think you're here on the next one anyway, aren't you?
Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
On May 5th of 2008, the council approved the Southgate Third Edition final plat that at that point in time was proposed to be developed in 3 phases. That was the third phase of the Southgate Edition. The entire subdivision was just around the 78-acre subdivision, I believe. Phase 1 and Phase 2 have since been constructed. Phase 3, as I mentioned, was approved in 2008, and no construction or development has occurred within Phase 3 to date. One of the kind of unique elements of the subdivision is it did include a parkland dedication or parkland agreement. The applicant or the developer had dedicated a 3.74 acre parcel of land at the first phase of Southgate Third Edition at the very eastern edge of the subdivision to satisfy all of the parkland dedication requirements for the Southgate Edition. When they reached that location in platting the third edition, they found that the configuration of the property, which was just a rectangle, didn't fit with the topography of the land and the street network that would need to be established in that area. As a result, the developer requested to reduce the parkland parcel slightly from 3.74 acres to 3 acres, in exchange also do some development on the park parcel, including the grading the site, the import and placement of topsoil, and the seeding of the 3-acre park, along with all the typical frontage improvement requirements. So we entered into an agreement to effect that, to vacate a portion of the previously dedicated parkland, to accept some additional dedication, and for the developer to be responsible for some development of the park parcel when that time came. The agreement also stated that if Phase 1 of the project was not the first phase of the subdivision to be developed, that the developer would still do the park improvements and develop an all-weather road surface, extending that from what we presume to be Granville to the park parcel to allow for maintenance crews and public access of the park, because Phase 1 was what provided the initial roadway access to the park parcel. So this just on the map shows the Southgate Edition. The blue is the entirety. This was Phase 1. Phase 2 was here, and so we're talking about Phase 3. So all the roadway improvements have been completed, and the green area here, crosshatch, is actually the parkland location within the subdivision. So they're now at Phase 3. Initially, the subdivision was proposed to have Phase 1 come off of Granville here. It would include this first portion of lots, and that was providing that access point to the parkland parcel. Phase 2 then would move up, and then Phase 3 would be the top of the hill off of Notting Hill Drive, extending to the south. The request that we have received is to move this to Phase 1. This would become Phase 2, and then this essentially would be Phase 3 as the last phase of the subdivision. But right now, the real focus is this becoming Phase 1 at the top of the hill. We have had conversations with the developer indicating that the parkland development agreement does require the development of the parkland with whatever is the next phase in the subdivision, that they require to provide that access roadway along Granville to provide both public access as well as access by city maintenance vehicles. Once we get the turf on, we're ready to maintain, mow that park parcel, and they understand that obligation. So the letter initially indicated wanting to establish the access point off of Robinson Park Road. Due to some of the grading on the park parcel, you would not actually be able to get equipment access onto the park parcel until you had extended that access road some distance into the site, and then it would not provide desirable access for residents of the subdivision to gain access to the site. So we did talk through that with the developer. They understand that and agree to the concept of establishing that pedestrian access as well as service and maintenance access off of the Granville alignment. So that's, I know the letter indicated off Robinson Park Road, but we have had further conversations and they have agreed to that proposal. So staff has reviewed it and recommends approval of the proposed phasing amendment with the condition that maintenance and pedestrian access be developed along the Granville alignment.
Questions?
Refresh my memory. How far does Granville go now before it ends?
I don't think I had one that's closer. Granville right now ends right here. So it's just a couple hundred feet that access would need to be established into the site.
Wayne?
I'll go along with what staff's recommending.
I would
See the
too. It
issue, I
sounds
do
like-
see, I would see the issue if it was coming off of Robinson Lake Road. I don't think that that's a good idea, but I'm fine with what staff's recommending.
Okay.
And I'm glad to see the developers willing to work for a solution for both parties. So I'm
Absolutely.
happy to see that.
Yeah.
Is the Thompson property, now this getting off, but is it still unplatted? That's platted to the south now, isn't
So
it?
Ridgeview is, received preliminary plat approval, but it was never brought forward for final plat.
Okay.
That'll actually be going to hearing by the Planning and Zoning Commission for a replat and some zoning amendments on May 14th, I believe.
But we're still keeping the network together as far as streets.
That'll still be, and that'll come forward to the council here in June. So actually, with some respects, doing the Phase 3 first helps bring Notting Hill and get that street connectivity with
Right.
Ridgeview.
Because that's, and with all that all happening together, that might be kind of nice to have that connectivity. Go ahead, Wayne.
Well, then the other, and I don't know if you can remember this or not, Art, when we looked at the initial platting of that, and there was discussion about Lundquist Lane and Flomer Lane and not connecting with it, and I'm trying to remember the reason why, other than the fact they're not within the city limits, but I think it seemed like the other one was we didn't want to connect with roads that were probably substandard to city code.
There were some difficulties with the alignment, a little bit with the topography and the condition of connection. There were pedestrian easements that were required as part of Southgate Third off of both of those roadway segments to provide pedestrian connectivity into Southgate.
Okay.
Move forward with
Yes,
approval.
sir.
Recommending it for approval. Consent agenda if
Yes, sir.
possible. And now, some more parkland discussion. Indian Hills 6th Edition Parkland Amendment Agreement, and Bill and Dwight are going to talk about that. You wanna-
Just to provide a little bit of background on this request, the Indian Hills 6th edition was previously approved by the council in April of 2008. That was a 23.5-acre subdivision, 69 platted lots, and 3 phases for development for that subdivision as well. Included a mixture of residential and some commercial zoning districts. Phase 1 of the subdivision was completed, and the majority of lots at this point in time have been developed within the subdivision within Phase 1. We had 2 lots that were previously zoned as general business that were since zoned to residential office and now have townhouses upon them. And then most recently, in 2013, the applicant did a replat of a portion of the subdivision along with a rezone of a portion of the phase, or actually the entirety of the Phase 3 lot that was a 5.69-acre lot in the original Indian Hills 6th Edition plat, to rezone that actually to a combination of residential office and a general business designation. At that point in time, the applicant had proposed to relocate the parkland that was previously dedicated within the Indian Hills Edition to a location that was adjacent to Alturas Park, and they were proposing to enlarge that park parcel because the rezone of the Phase 3 lot increased their parkland dedication requirement from the prior zoning designation. This is the current configuration of the subdivision, so the Indian Hills 6, or Indian Hills 6, I almost said Rolling Hills, subdivision is outlined in red, and the green indicates the existing park parcel location. The replat application actually was proposing to do an exchange or relocation of the parkland parcel, add residential lots in the existing park location, and then have a slightly larger park parcel located up a little bit to the north and slightly to the east. Ultimately, the council chose not to approve the new parkland location, and that left the applicant with a need to satisfy their additional 10,000 square feet, roughly, of parkland dedication that resulted from the residential office zoning change for that Phase 3 lot. During the application, or during the time of consideration of the subdivision plat, there was a fair amount of discussion about the possibility of trying to enlarge the existing park parcel in its existing location. Those did not come to fruition, and ultimately the applicant proposed to dedicate that 10,000 square feet slightly to the west and south of this site near the previous Indian Hills 8th Edition parkland dedication location. And that's ultimately what was accepted by the council. So the yellow square is the approximate location of where the applicant dedicated that 9,914 square feet to meet their increased parkland dedication requirements. That's just a little bit closer detail. This is the 1.74 acre parcel that was dedicated as part of the Indian Hills 8th edition, and this is the additional 9914 square feet that was dedicated to meet that additional requirement as a result of the rezone. Since that approval, in August, there had been a fair amount of discussion between the developer, neighbors, and city staff about the park and looking at other ways to possibly meet that dedication requirement. And we received a request this spring, a proposal from the developer in response to a request from a neighbor that would outline a proposal to relocate that parkland dedication requirement and ultimately add the 2 adjacent lots to the west of the existing park parcel to that park property. So the proposal ultimately is to take the existing park location, add the 2 lots that are directly adjacent to the west of the park parcel, and do a slight boundary line adjustment on the eastern edge, and ultimately end up with a park configuration that looks something like that. In more detail, like I mentioned, lots 1 and 2 of Block 6 would be added to the existing park parcel. That would add 14,235 square feet. The city would then vacate a portion of the park located on the east side of the boundary that would add about 1,789 or 90 square feet to these 2 lots in general. And the resulting park parcel then would be 53,517 square feet, which would be a net gain of about 12,454 square feet, and would have frontage and be open on both Indian Hills Drive on the south and Blaine on the west side. I would mention, I think I've got a diagram here, so this is ultimately the mechanics of what would occur, is that there would be a sliver that we would need to vacate, that 1,790 square feet would need to be vacated, the parkland would need to be vacated, and would be added to the 2 adjacent lots. I did receive a request this morning from the applicant indicating that they did not understand this was the configuration that was described in the proposal, and do wish to modify that slightly. They don't wish to change the square footage, so the square footage would still be the 1,790 square feet in total that would be vacated, but they'd like to see it in an even configuration. So essentially take the existing alignment of this lot line and move it westward until you reach 1,900 or 1,790 square feet. So rather than being 18 and a half here at the top and 2 at the bottom, it's going to be somewhere around 8 to 9 to 10 feet that it would move over until you reach that mark. So 10 feet, it'd be actually maybe just about 11. So they just want an equal strip. And that's different than what was included in the request, which was trying to get both these lots to essentially 95 feet in depth, and that's what resulted in the 1,790 square feet in size. It doesn't really change the square footage or the size of the park. It is a slight alteration to what we understood the proposal to be. In turn, Lot 1 would essentially be dedicated in exchange for the vacation of the parcel, and then there would be a proposal that the city would be able to purchase Lot 2 at a price of $47,500. The applicant would request the city vacate the pedestrian easements that currently exist from Alturas Drive up to Apony and from Apony to the park parcel. Those were required at the time of approval to try to help reduce that walking distance from lots that may be to the north of the site, having to walk all the way down, all the way around to reach the park parcel. With those 2 lots being added and the park being opened up here onto Blaine Street, that will significantly reduce the travel distance. And therefore, the applicant does not feel that the pedestrian easements are warranted any longer. The developer would also be responsible for all frontage improvements for the ultimate park parcel and will provide water and storm connections to serve the park parcel. And the city would contribute the $47,500 toward the acquisition of really the Lot 2 of Block 6. And of that, Lot 1 of 6 would be dedicated, and that'd be 7,152 square feet would be dedicated for parkland dedication, and then we would purchase the Lot 2 of Block 6 for $47,500, which is proposed to be funded through a $40,000 private donation and then $7,500 funding contribution from the city's parkland acquisition and development line item. The applicant has also requested that the city retain the 9,914 square feet that was previously dedicated near the Indian Hills 8th Edition in order to establish a location for a new park. So that would be used as credit towards future development of property within a half mile of that dedication. They've indicated they'd like to have that as a focal point rather than having trying to decide where a future park would be when they start to develop their property to the south. They'd like to have a location that is held, and the city would issue a letter to the developer indicating that that would be held and will be applied as credit towards future parkland dedication of the surrounding property. The developer also, in the request, did not wish to request or advocate for any actions or incur any costs. They feel that they're accommodating the neighborhood's desire and the city's desire to enlarge the park parcel, and so they didn't wish to incur any additional cost. And therefore, the city would work on developing legal descriptions and legal agreements to affect the exchange and dedications and vacations. The developer also, in their request, wished to make it clear that the timing of the development of Phase 2 was dependent upon market conditions, and they didn't want to have any expectations about how quickly it would be developed, although at this point in time, they're indicating this fall they'll begin with underground utility work and finish up with roadways in the spring. And the developer also indicated they'd like to have an opportunity to approve or participate in the park naming process. The Parks and Rec Commission has reviewed the proposal and has recommended approval. The first step from staff's perspective was to develop an agreement that would identify all the steps that we would need to engage in and the responsibilities of each party. So that is the memorandum of understanding that's before you this afternoon that lays out all of the actions that each entity and each party would need to participate in order to effect this. So that would really be the first step. If the council were to approve the MOU, then we would execute that, and then we begin in the process for noticing and the hearings for the vacation of both the parkland area as well as the pedestrian easements. Once that was completed and we accepted the dedication along with the vacation, the dedication of Lot 1 of Block 6 and concurrently with the vacation of the sliver on the eastern boundary, we would then move towards the acquisition purchase of the remaining lots. So those are the general outline. Staff recommends approval of the parkland amendment agreement, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
I think this could probably be some of the best $7,500 the city could spend in a long time, that and staff time doing the legal descriptions and things, because it's going to get the city a more substantial park. It's going to make the neighbors in that area much happier, and I think it works well for everyone. And thanks indeed to the donor for the money to help facilitate all of this. The pedestrian access, I think with the acquisition of those two lots on the west side, it surely shortens down the walking time people would have to make and comes out just about a tie, I think. So seating back the pedestrian access is also a good thing. A little give and take all around. I think we've got a really good proposal here.
I agree, Wayne.
Yep, I agree. It's been a long time coming. There's been a lot of discussion on this particular part, and lots of neighborhood input. I'm glad to see this. Looks like it's finally coming to a consolidated plan that everybody can work with.
With that, Gary, you got anything?
Just that I want to thank staff for all their work on making this. This is about the 6th or 7th iteration, false start on this issue, so we're glad to see it come together.
Finish line in sight.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go ahead and recommend approval and consent agenda.
Yeah, should it be consent or should it go on to regular agenda? Because I think it's controversial enough for the neighborhood and everyone else.
Yeah, we can do that.
I'd like to see it on the regular agenda myself.
Okay, that way we can tell them we're done with it. All right.
Okay.
Next up is Indian Hills 6th Edition minor phase amendment request.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We have received a request from the developer of the Indian Hills 6th Edition to slightly amend the phasing boundary to allow for the issuance of building permit on Lot 10 of Block 5, which is located in what was identified as Phase 2 on the subdivision phasing plan. Subdivisions are allowed to be developed in phases, but generally you have to complete all the public improvements within a phase or furnish security for those public improvements within that phase prior to building permits being eligible to be issued within that individual phase. This is the original phasing plan. There's actually a line here, so this was Phase 3. This what's identified here as Block 5. So Phase 1 included the portion of the subdivision that's already been developed, along with the 1-acre lot at the far eastern extent of the subdivision. This is the Phase 2 boundary, so everything south there here was Phase 2, and then Phase 3 was a singular lot. We had one minor phasing amendment that we did last year for a lot that was located here on Indian Hills Drive. Within the construction of the improvements in Phase 1, about 80% of the frontage improvements had been completed on that lot, and the developer had somebody who was interested in that lot and requested an amendment. So we did essentially require the deposit of security to complete the remaining 20 feet or so of frontage improvements. Council did approve that, and that was issued a building permit, and a home has been constructed on the property. We have a similar situation here where the developer is indicating they're going to move forward with Phase 2 and Phase 3 this fall, but actually won't be to the roadway improvements until the spring of next year. And there's an individual that has a desire to build a home on this one lot that happens to be on that phase boundary. The lot is on the corner of Blaine and a Pony Place, and there's about 164 feet of frontage as a corner lot. About 66 feet of the Blaine Street frontage was constructed and completed during the construction of Phase 1, and that leaves about 98 feet of frontage that has not yet been completed. The developer is proposing to furnish a financial security for the remaining undeveloped frontage, and we do anticipate that this will get completed in the spring of next year. There was an exhibit in the packet that shows the green areas, what's been constructed on Blaine, the yellow is a lot in question, and the red would be the remaining improvement obligation for that lot. And again, just a photograph showing that. I think the layout is to have a driveway that would approach onto Blaine, so access would be adequate on the lot where the frontage has been improved to be very similar to the lot across the street in this situation. So I guess the recommendations from staff are to recommend approval of the proposed minor phasing amendment with the condition that the developer furnish a acceptable security for the completion of the remaining undeveloped street frontage. And that value of that security would be established and approved by the city engineer.
I think with the provision of the security deposit, the city's interests are looked out for. It enables the development of the lot, and there's no reason to say no. I think it's quite reasonable.
Yeah, that's good. Fine with it.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move it forward to consent. Anything else for the good of the order?
No, sir.
All right, we'll consider ourselves adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Done.